If a pina colada was a video game, it would be Super Mario Sunshine. I don't think there's been a game before or since the original 2002 release on the GameCube that captures the island resort vibes so well. From the pristine white sand beaches to the charming villages and towns, wild amusement park, and beautiful nature, it has all the elements of a tropical vacation that you could ask for. There's been a lot of buzz around Nintendo's new theme park, Super Nintendo World, but if you ask me, they're wasting their time with all that. I'm not spending hundreds of dollars to sit in a Mario Kart ride that some kid crapped his pants on right before. Instead, what Nintendo should do is buy their own island, Jurassic Park style, and turn it into Isle Delfino. I want to drink a rum punch sitting outside in Delfino Plaza and grab some blooper sushi in Rico Harbor. But sadly, not everyone feels the same way. Over the years, Super Mario Sunshine has become no stranger to criticism. It's often regarded as one of the worst 3D Mario games, although that is kinda like saying you're gonna buy the cheapest Rolex. When your competition is masterpieces like Super Mario Galaxy and Odyssey, it's perfectly respectable to come up a few inches short. So why does Sunshine not get the same level of love as the other titles? I think the best way to sum it up is that it falls all too well into the "it's a good game, but not a good blank game" sentiment. You have to remember, this is the sequel to Super Mario 64, the game that defined what 3D games would become. Mario 64 had a wide variety of environments and gameplay styles that it introduced, bringing the franchise into a new era while also feeling undoubtedly like a Mario game. See, Super Mario Sunshine is a follow-up to Super Mario 64, but it also isn't. It has the same characters and structure as 64, but major change-ups to the setting and the gameplay. Yes, the tropical island aesthetic of Sunshine is incredibly well done, but it does feel like a strange choice after 64 had you going from battlefield to snowy mountain to creepy harbor within minutes. The changes to the gameplay come in the form of the world's most expensive camelback named F.L.U.D. Mario's water jetpack he has in the game serves two primary functions, spraying water in front of him and letting him hover in the air. F.L.U.D is probably the most controversial addition to the game, very much a love it or hate it kind of thing. 99% of Sunshine's world is designed around you using F.L.U.D, so it's not the kind of thing you could ignore if you feel like. It's changes like these that make Super Mario Sunshine a sequel to Super Mario 64, but not the successor. Before I get too deep into it, there's a few interesting things about F.L.U.D that I want to touch on. First, does anyone else think it's weird how when Mario is arrested in the beginning of the game, he gets to keep F.L.U.D with him in jail? Here's the guy who the residents think just ruined their entire island with toxic waste, but yeah, hold on to that high propulsion water gun while you're behind bars, no problem. Also, one small detail that's super cool about F.L.U.D is that it was created by Professor E. Gadd from Luigi's Mansion. I love that little Easter egg because it makes complete sense within the game and it ties the Mario universe more closely together. This is the kind of little tease that I wish Nintendo would do more of. Anyway, it's the heightened focus on F.L.U.D's use in the gameplay that makes it one of Super Mario Sunshine's biggest strengths, but also highlights its worst shortcomings. My assumption is that the primary reason F.L.U.D was added to the game was to expand Mario's moveset. It says it right there in the box, has more moves than ever. On paper, I'd say F.L.U.D accomplishes this, but it doesn't do as much as it could or should. This becomes apparent when you start to unlock the extra nozzles later in the game. By default, you have two nozzles, the spray nozzle and the hover nozzle. They serve the exact functions that their names suggest. The spray nozzle lets you spray water at things, and the hover nozzle lets you hover in the air. The spray nozzle you always have, but eventually you can unlock two other abilities that can replace the hover nozzle. The turbo nozzle lets you blast ahead super fast, and is especially fun in the ocean where you can't run out of water. The rocket nozzle shoots you way up in the air, and is super useful for getting those hard to reach areas. The introduction of these nozzles comes with one pretty big setback. That's that aside from the standard spray nozzle, you can only have one of these nozzles at a time. Each time you want to swap your nozzle out, you have to go find the box that contains the one you want. Just this small thing is so limiting to the gameplay. As the game is now, parts of the levels where you actually need the nozzles are few and far between, making these extra abilities feel more like afterthoughts than priorities. The most significant sections where they're required to reach another area is in the hub world, which only happens a couple of times in the entire game. It's like the designers were afraid to to require you to use one of the extra nozzles because they didn't want you to have to go back to one of the boxes to pick them up. So we're left with a game where for 99% of situations, you're perfectly fine with the hover nozzle. But let's imagine a multiverse version of Super Mario Sunshine, where when you unlock the turbo and rocket nozzles, you just get them permanently and can swap to them at any time. If you could have all three nozzles at once, the levels would be able to have way more complex and interesting platforming sequences where you have to switch between them. Maybe there could be a part where you need to use the turbo nozzle to jump a big gap, then the rocket nozzle to get up to a certain height, and then a mid-air switch to the hover nozzle to maneuver yourself to the right position. And this just scratches the surface of what the creative geniuses at Nintendo could design. This could also put a bigger emphasis on the hidden shine sprites and blue coins. Maybe there's a shrine way up high that you can see from the beginning of the game, but you can't get to until you unlock the rocket nozzle. But something like this would also require a change to the game's completion requirements. Of course, Super Mario Sunshine is hailed for its complex and deep story, which is filled with perplexing mysteries. Just who is behind Mecha Bowser and Bowser Jr.? It's impossible to know without beating the game. You would never guess who it is. To finish Sunshine's story and figure out the identity of this cryptic figure, you have to beat 7 missions in each stage. Not get a certain number of shine sprites, just get the 7 from each stage. Any ones you get from red coin missions? Useless, forget about them. Shines in the hub world? Useless, no one cares. The ones you can get from blue coins? Puh. Don't make me laugh. This is such a baffling design choice coming off of Super Mario 64, where all you needed was a certain number of stars to progress. It gave the player way more freedom, as it let them skip the stars they had trouble with, or let them feel like pros for getting them out of order. If Sunshine kept this route, it again opens up so many more possibilities, especially when you pair it with the idea of having all nozzles at all times. Then, the extra shine sprites and blue coins would actually be worth something, instead of just being a carrot on a stick. And let me just take a minute to clear this up about the blue coins. I'm always seeing people complain about how it's a grind to get them all and they're hidden in very unassuming areas. That's because you're not supposed to get them all. They're not the kinds of things the designers want you to hunt down one by one. You're supposed to come across them naturally as you play and pick them up when you happen to see them. They're a bonus, not a requirement. I see the same complaint about the Koroks in Zelda, saying that there's way too many to get them all. Yeah, that's because you aren't intended to. They're there to make the world feel full, not to be entries in a completionist's checklist. But yes, with these few changes to the nozzles and structure, I think Super Mario Sunshine could have been a vastly superior game. It's still a title I'm a big fan of, and I'm happy to pick it up whenever I'm craving a digital margarita. But knowing how much better it could have been, it just makes the rim a little bit too salty. What might be the saddest thing about this is that the door on the idea of a Super Mario Sunshine 2 seems permanently closed. Since titles like Super Mario Galaxy, 3D World, and Odyssey, I don't see Nintendo aiming the Mario franchise back in the singular direction that another Sunshine game would require. With each entry in the 3D Mario series coming out so far apart, it's not likely for them to put years of development into something that is probably going to upset more fans than it pleases. It feels like the concept of the game hasn't yet been fully explored, but what we have now is as far as Nintendo is willing to take it. Super Mario Sunshine is all it can ever be, for better or for worse.